The air tastes like sulfur. A woman is standing in the doorway of her home on the Via dell'Abbondanza, holding an iron key she will never use again. Behind her, the house still smells of yesterday's bread. Above her, Vesuvius released its first column of smoke just over 2 hours ago. It is the 24th of August, 79 AD, and Pompeii has 18 hours of existence left. What led thousands of people to stay? Not the cowardly, not the careless. The people who chose to remain, and there were many, had reasons any one of us would recognize. The answer reveals something about the way human beings relate to the soil where they were born, to the objects they have accumulated, to the belief that the familiar can never be truly dangerous. What they felt in those 18 hours changes what we understand about what it means to be human in the face of the unimaginable. Pompeii, in August of 79, was a city of approximately 11,000 permanent inhabitants. A conservative estimate based on the capacity of the amphitheater, which held 20,000 people, and on the density documented by archaeologists of the Soprintendenza Archeologica di Napoli. It was not a small city. It was a commercial node of the Mediterranean. It exported garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans poured over almost everything, and wine grown on the volcanic slopes that, no one could have known then, nourished their vineyards with ash from previous eruptions. The city had sidewalks. It had stone traffic guides, raised blocks in the middle of streets so pedestrians could cross without stepping in waste. It had restaurants with menus painted on the wall. It had electoral graffiti, gladiator announcements, declarations of love, and petty insults, all still legible 2,000 years later. What most people do not know is that Pompeii had survived a severe earthquake just 16 years earlier, in 63 AD. Many buildings were still under reconstruction on the day of the eruption. The inhabitants had already lived through a catastrophe. They had already rebuilt. Why would this time be different? It is around midday when the ash column reaches 26 kilometers in height. Volcanologists call this phase a Plinian eruption, named after Pliny the Younger, who observed it from the other side of the bay and recorded it with a precision that still guides modern geologists. At this point, pumice stones begin to rain on the city, small at first, the size of walnuts, then the size of fists. A baker, we do not know his name, but we found his 81 carbonized loaves still in the oven when archaeologists arrived in 1860, was probably still in the street watching the sky when the first pumice stone struck his shoulder. Most ancient accounts from Pliny suggest the stones were light enough not to kill, but heavy enough to hurt. He probably went back inside. This is the first great cognitive trap of Pompeii. The eruption began in a bearable way. It hurt. It frightened. But it did not kill. Not yet. And human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to that distinction. If something does not kill us now, our minds tend to conclude it may never kill us at all. Archaeologists from the University of Naples documented over decades of excavation something deeply unsettling about the distribution of bodies in Pompeii. Many were found inside houses, not at the door, not trying to escape. Inside, in rooms, some holding valuable objects, purses of coins, jewelry, bronze statuettes of their household gods. This led archaeologist Estelle Lazare, who studied the human remains of Pompeii for years, to conclude that a significant portion of the population was not trying to flee when they died. They were waiting, protecting, hoping it would pass. This behavior has a name in the modern psychology of disasters. It is called milling. The process by which people, Instead of acting, consult their neighbors, wait for more information, seek social consensus before moving. In evacuation situations, studies by sociologist Lee Clark show that milling is responsible for delays of between 30 minutes and several hours. Delays that, in Pompeii, made the difference between life and death. But there was something more than psychology at work. There was the weight of familiar ground. A woman in her mid-40s, her bones were found in the House of Menander, identified by researchers as someone of sufficient status to wear gold rings. 3 of them, on her right hand, was found on the upper floor of the house, not on the ground floor, upstairs. Researchers believe she climbed as the pumice level on the lower floor rose too high. The house, literally, was being buried from the ground up, and she adapted. She kept climbing. She tried to stay at the surface of what was happening. It is an impulse that anyone who has ever looked at their home, the house where they grew up, where their children took their first steps, where their dead still seem to inhabit the corners, recognizes without effort. It is not stupidity. It is the weight of familiar ground. The night of the 24th of August is when everything changes. At 11:30 in the evening, the eruptive column collapses. When a Plinian column collapses, the material being expelled upward, ash, gas, rock, no longer has enough force to remain airborne. It falls. And as it races down the volcano's slope at 300 kilometers per hour, at temperatures between 200 and 500 degrees Celsius, it becomes what volcanologists call a pyroclastic density current. It is not lava. It is faster than any person can run. It is hotter than any building can withstand. And in the dark, it is invisible. The first current struck Herculaneum, the city to the northwest, closest to the volcano, around midnight. Pompeii was struck by the fourth current, somewhere between 6 and 8 in the morning of the 25th of August. Those who survived the hours of falling pumice and remained in the city died at this moment. Not slowly. Studies by volcanologist Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo, published in 2008 in the journal PLOS ONE, show that the temperature of the current that struck Pompeii was sufficient to kill any living being in less than 1 second. Muscles contracted. Bodies assumed the brace positions we still find today, not from prolonged agony, but from instantaneous muscular contraction caused by extreme heat. They did not suffer long, but they did not escape. For nearly 2 centuries after the rediscovery of Pompeii in 1748, historians told this story as a tale of sudden catastrophe. A city caught off guard, without warning, without choice. That is not true. The sources we have, Pliny the Younger, the bodies, the distribution of victims, the objects they were holding, tell a far more uncomfortable story. Many inhabitants of Pompeii had hours of warning. They saw the column. They heard the stones. They felt the earth tremble. Seismically, Vesuvius registered activity for days before the eruption, as documented by Pliny himself in his letter to the historian Tacitus, and they stayed. Not out of ignorance, out of something that modern volcanologists, studying evacuations in risk zones like the Naples area today, where 600,000 people live within the evacuation zone of the still active Vesuvius, call normalcy bias. The human tendency to believe that because something has not happened yet in our lifetime, it probably will not happen now. Those who stayed were not different from us. They were exactly like us. Today, 600,000 people live within the red evacuation zone of Vesuvius. The Italian government has evacuation plans. It has marked routes. It runs regular drills, and risk perception studies conducted by the University Federico II of Naples consistently show that most residents believe they will have enough time to decide when the moment comes, that they will be able to read the signs, assess the situation, and leave when necessary. That is exactly what the inhabitants of Pompeii believed. The name that psychologists give to what was buried with them is not cowardice and not ignorance. It is the weight of familiar ground, the deeply human conviction that the place where our life makes sense cannot be the same place where our life ends. Pompeii was not destroyed because people did not know the danger existed. It was preserved with such perfection, with such human detail, because people believed until the end that that place would protect them, that the walls they had built would hold, that the gods of their households would recognize their homes. 2,000 years later, their bodies are still there. Their bread is still in the oven. Their gold rings are still on their fingers. And we are still exactly like them. The only difference between us and those who stayed is that we have not yet found our Vesuvius.